order, like Jennifer to lead the pledge.
Sure thing. Let's do it. Let's pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. In the absence of our chair and our vice chair, we're going to hold an election right after I do the roll call. All right? Commissioner Fonda Bernardi? Here. Commissioner Fresco? Here. Commissioner Kennedy?
Here.
Commissioner Newbold?
Here.
And Commissioner Perry?
Here.
Thank you.
Can I make a motion?
Absolutely.
Can I move that we ask Jason Perry to chair the meeting tonight in absence of our chair and vice chair.
Second.
If you'll accept.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And, excuse me, I don't think there's a need to elect a vice chair unless Jason thinks he may not stay for the entire meeting.
Yeah, I don't expect, but we'll see where we are at like 11:30. Okay, so that takes us to item 4, the Planning Director's Report.
Good evening, Commission. I wanted to mention coming up next Tuesday, October 13th at the City Council meeting, there's a few significant items coming from planning. One is the development agreement at 1415 Fifth, so that's something the Commission saw a month or so ago, as well as the development agreement for the Denny's site. So both of those are going to City Council next Tuesday. In addition, that night, the Council will be looking at our schedule for updating the downtown specific plan. And also, we're introducing a concept within the staff report of that document. The staff report came out today, so you may want to take a look at it. But it's the idea of creating what we're kind of calling a plan within a plan in the downtown area, where we would look at the parcels fronting on the freeway, so between Colorado and the freeway, Ocean and Fifth, and we would do a more precise, specific plan on those parcels so that we're able to look at the access issues and potential freeway capping opportunities, reconfiguration of the off-ramp, all the circulation things that come into play when you think of those sites. So again, instead of looking at them on a project-by-project basis as they come through, we want to step back again on those 3 parcels and do a more in-depth study. And that's something that we are suggesting to City Council next Tuesday, and we'll take direction from there on that. As part of that same report, we also talk about the development agreement process and our attempts to standardize the community benefits. We've been fairly successful at doing that with the DA projects that you've seen recently. The housing projects have been a very similar package of community benefits, and that's the concept that we're introducing to Council. So again, that staff report came out today. You may want to take a look at it. It has a lot of impact in terms of the work that you folks do as well. Beyond that, our next meeting is October 21st. We have a application for a conversion of a medical building, or excuse me, it's an office building where they're converting some of the space to medical office. That's at 20th and Santa Monica Boulevard. So that will be on the agenda. And there's a few other things that will be on that agenda as well. So that concludes my report, and been happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Fresco, I see your light on. Do you have a question related to the Planning Director's report?
From when I said.
Okay. Any other questions from other commissioners? Okay, thank you. So that takes us to the item 5, Planning Commissioner announcements. Are there any? Not seeing any. On to item 6, approval of minutes, 6A and 6B. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, and I want to confirm with staff that there were revisions to 6A. Is that correct? Okay. So
With revisions.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so those minutes are approved. And that takes us to item 8, our consent calendar. And Commissioner Newbold.
I want to move that we move item 10A to consent. I think, it's a project that's been operating with the same operations on the same site since 1946. All they're doing is expanding for new equipment and ADA compliant employee bathrooms. The operations remain the same. They have unique site access issues, and I feel very comfortable that I'd like to move this.
Is there any objection?
Second.
I'll second it.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any objection from any commissioners on moving that over to the consent calendar? Do we need a motion related to that? Okay. And before we go to that, do we have any requests to speak on 10A? Okay, so no request to speak. So all those in favor of moving? Yeah. Yes. Here, I got you.
Items 8A and 8B would like to request a continuance before you move on the consent calendar. And the
Okay.
applicant is here to explain what they have to do that.
Don't we
Okay.
have to vote to move that
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
So let's first vote to move 10A over to the consent calendar, and then we will take up the question of 8A and 8B. All those in favor of moving 10A to consent,
Aye.
please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so that is now on our consent calendar. So there's been, you said the applicant has requested continuance for 8A and 8B. Any objection from commissioners? Do we need to vote to continue those items? Okay, so is there a motion to continue?
I'll move that we continue items 8A and 8B, 1420 20th and 1422 20th Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of continuing 8A and 8B, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. So those are continued. So before us now is 10A as a consent item.
Commissioner, before you vote on it, I just wanted to bring a procedural matter to your attention, real quick. So there's a noticing issue with this property. The notice of tonight's hearing was not properly posted as required by the new code. However, the newspaper notice was provided and the radius notice, both of those were done properly. Strict compliance with the noticing requirements is not required as long as the issue is really whether the lack of compliance is prejudicial. The need to post the property is a new requirement. That was part of the new zoning ordinance update. The variances in the past had not been required to provide that type of posting. They've been required to meet the other posting. We think because of the property's unique location, that reduces the lack of impact of the lack of posting. So it's our recommendation that you can go forward as you're planning to do, because we think that there was adequate notice. But I did want to bring that to your attention. So, and staff will, it's a new provision, and everyone is now quite aware of it. So I don't think that will happen again.
Yeah, are there questions or concerns on that point from commissioners? Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on 10A as a consent item.
I move 10A.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, 10A is approved. And we're on to item 9A, fence wall hedge modification appeal. Are there any ex parte disclosures from commissioners on 9A? Okay.
I walked by
Commissioner
the
Wolf.
property. I can't remember. We're supposed to do that, right?
Yep.
I walked by the property the day before the last scheduled hearing. I don't remember the date, just to look at it. That's it.
Okay, any others? Commissioner Fresco,
I looked at it the Monday before the last hearing.
Commissioner Fonda Bernardi.
Same thing. I can't remember the date, but it was before the last hearing.
Okay, Commissioner Kennedy.
I walk past or jog past the location frequently, although I haven't really noticed it during my jogs, but I've been in the house next door on occasions to talk about community activism and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and I do not have any ex parte communications to disclose. Okay, so if we could have the staff report, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Michael Roque, Associate Planner of the City Planning Division. And the project before you tonight is an appeal of a hedge height modification located at 530 17th Street. The applicant is appealing the zoning administrator's denial of a hedge height modification and is requesting that the Planning Commission consider the hedge height modification for a 7-foot tall hedge within the front yard setback. The site is located in the R1 district along 17th Street between and Lake Alta Avenue in the North of Montana neighborhood. The subject site is a 7,500 square foot site developed with a 2-story single family residence. In August of 2014, the current owners planted a new 7-foot ficus hedge directly behind an existing front yard block wall without city approval. On September 5th of 2014, a complaint was filed with our Code Compliance Division for the overheight hedge. And then on November 6th of 2014, the owners filed an application for a hedge height modification. As I mentioned prior, the subject site currently has a 7-foot high hedge and were planted by the appellant without city approval. Per the Santa Monica Municipal Code, fences, walls, or hedges cannot exceed a maximum height of 42 inches within the required front yard setback. Here's a site plan and a hedge plan. I don't have my pointer, so excuse me, I can't point to where I'm going to tonight, but if you can follow along, the red area is where the hedges were planted in relation to the property line along 17th Street there. And then the green box is the actual front yard setback area. So that shows you in relation to where those are in relation to the front yard area. And then below there, you'll see the ficus hedge wall plan at 7 feet high. The zoning administrator held a public meeting for the height modification request on December 9th of 2014. On January 28, 2015, the hedge height request was denied based on the fact that a 7-foot hedge is not compatible with the prevailing characteristics of the 500 and 600 blocks of 17th Street where there are only a small percentage, which is 12% of the properties, that have front yard fences, walls, or hedges over 42 inches, and staff is recommending that the Planning Commission uphold the zoning administrator determination. Since this hearing is a de novo type review, here are the required findings if the Planning Commission wishes to approve the actual project. Is it compatible with the other structures in the area? It will, if you wish to approve, you have to make a finding that it will not be detrimental to the property or the area. And lastly, it will not impair the integrity or character of the neighborhood. Public notices were sent out to all property owners within a 750-foot radius, and we did receive 4 comments in like opposition. And we did receive 3 comments that were in support. This will conclude staff's presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Question from the appellant? Okay. Thank you. So if the appellant would please come forward, you have 15 minutes to present.
Slide up. Do you want your slides up? Okay. set. Thank you. Yeah, sure, no problem.
I want to check with Steph. I have the sequencing right. The appellant goes first. Okay. Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is, along with my wife, the homeowner that resides at 530 17th Street. This first picture, I didn't plan this, but in terms of, I think, what happened here for us, I remember walking in that front gate the first time we saw the house, and my wife and I both looked at each other, and one of our concerns in terms of moving into this area was having this great big house and not a big yard. My daughter was 1 at the time. We were moving from a house that had a big pool in the backyard and didn't have any grass area for her to play in. And so when we bought the house, a big selling point for us was that there would be a yard for her to play in. My daughter's a little over 2 now, and that it would be private and, secure as much as it could be, given that there's a little wall there. And you can see what was there before. The way I define a hedge, I don't know what the technical definition of a hedge is, but that's a hedge. If you Google the definition of hedge, it says something like trees planted next to each other in order to create some sort of private space. That's what was there before. When I walked through that gate with my wife, we commented to each other about how we liked the fact that it was private and it was a shaded area. So that was number one for us. It was a selling point for the house. We love the area. I'm not saying we wouldn't have bought the house if it didn't have those trees there. But that's what we walked into the first time I saw it. We then hired a landscape architect who came in and gave us their opinion. And their opinion was we could clean it up, make it look nicer and neater, and not have overgrown trees that were as high. And I remember having a discussion about how high we wanted them. We didn't know there was a zoning ordinance, had no clue to even think about it because of what was there in terms of what was existing before. Otherwise, that would have played into our discussion about how high to do them. So the truth is, in terms of how we came up with 7 feet, it was totally arbitrary and completely based on what we thought looked good and would still provide us with the shade and privacy that we wanted. I think you guys have the letters. I don't know if you actually have seen them, but we actually do use this space. And this isn't me just making up an excuse as to why we want to keep these hedges. For the last, I believe, 6 months, we've had a music class. We have a music teacher that comes from my daughter's preschool. She liked music, loved music. We tried going to different classes, and she was very overwhelmed by them. So we decided to do it at our home, and we do it in the front yard. And it's 6 months ago, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 kids, mostly kids that we knew. And over time, it's expanded. And sometimes there's only 3 kids there, sometimes there's more. And it's expanded to other kids from the neighborhood that have met my nanny. Frankly, there's one family that submitted a letter who I wouldn't know that lives in the neighborhood but for us having this music class in our front yard. And frankly, I met them and they were at my daughter's 2nd birthday because my nanny met their nanny. And so they started bringing their kids over to listen to the music class. I saw this previous slide about, what you guys need in terms of reviewing this. I wish I had that information ahead of time, so I'm really not all that prepared. But I can tell you this, and obviously it's self-serving, but I don't really see how this harms the neighborhood at all. I mean, especially when you look at the old picture versus the new picture. Again, it's open to interpretation, it's my opinion, but it's so much cleaner now than it was before. We keep it very well trimmed, and I don't see how this hurts. Definitely doesn't hurt the property, that's for sure. If anything, it helps the property. And in terms of hurting, the neighborhood, I saw a figure there. It looked like it said it was only 12% in terms of the surrounding homes. That seems low to me just from my walking through the neighborhood. There are plenty of homes, maybe not, I don't know if that's just the 500 and 600 block, but especially on 17th Street and other streets that go through to San Vicente, you'll notice that there's more hedges on those streets because drivers actually drive through because it goes all the way through to San Vicente to Montana. So there's more people that don't live in the neighborhood that are driving through the neighborhood or walking through the neighborhood. We're north of Alta, but on a Saturday or Sunday when the weather's good or if there's something going on Montana, there are a lot of people that park in front of our house that don't live in the neighborhood. So having that privacy is a real concern. It's not just about the shade and having a place for Mila, my daughter, to play in and have her friends over, but having that privacy is a real concern. You can't see the windows of our house from here because of what's there, but we have two huge windows on the first floor. If you took our hedges away, you'd be able to see right into those. And not just by standing right by the property line, you'd probably be able to see into our windows from across the street. So, it's a real concern for us. It was a selling point for us. And I hope you guys will approve it. Thank you for your time.
I'm Ryan's landscape architect, and I want to start by saying that, kind of upholding a point that he said, was that when we were called in on this project, we had no knowledge of the 42-inch hedge requirement. To be honest, this was the first project that we had done in the city of Santa Monica, so we didn't even think to research that either based off of the 15-foot hedge that was on the property. And the shrubs that were there, they were 15 feet tall. They were planted roughly 3 to 4 feet away from each other. My professional opinion is that would be a hedge as well. I glanced through the staff report really quickly, and I did see that was not a registered hedge, but that hedge had definitely been there for a substantial amount of time and had never been cited, and there had never been a complaint filed against it. So I'm not quite sure why now, after it's been cleaned up, the hedge has actually been lowered in height, and that's a current picture of the property. You actually see more of the house now, and the property is actually more open to the street than it previously was before the work was performed. And that being said, had we known that there was a hedge height requirement in the city of Santa Monica before it was performed, went through the city and sought the proper channels instead of just taking it out. I don't want any of you to think that it was done maliciously or a thought of, let's see if we can just do it and get past without anybody finding out. It was purely that we weren't educated on that fact. And just like another point Ryan said, I've been living in the neighborhood for roughly 6 months now, and I frequently walk through the neighborhood, and there are a lot of homes that have hedges that are much taller than this. There's even some houses that have a 5 to 6 foot like sliding gate for cars where you can't even see into the property at all. This, you still have the previous pedestrian gate that was on the property. You can see into the front yard if you are walking past. And as far as allowing light through from the house onto the sidewalk at night, they do have 2 lights there, so right outside or right at the gate, so you are providing some illumination onto the sidewalk. And just another point that I have here is that that's absolutely true, that I've walked and driven through every street from 19th through 7th Street, and the streets that go from San Vicente through to Montana and then beyond, they have a substantially higher amount of homes that have a hedge or a wall in front of it. And I would imagine that would be due to the increased traffic getting to Montana or into the city of Santa Monica, because that does create a bit of a thoroughfare there. And that is all I have right now, unless you have questions for us.
We have a question from Commissioner Fresco.
So is your primary business landscape architecture?
It is.
And do you work with a firm in Los Angeles?
Yeah, we're located in Silver Lake, Arizona.
And how long have you been around?
My boss has been in business for well over 20 years.
And do they have hedge height laws in Los Angeles?
They do in Beverly Hills. Not so much in Los Angeles, unless it is a HOA requirement.
And it never occurred to you to look and see if they had laws in a community like Santa Monica with a reputation for a lot of laws?
Well, like I said, this is my first time doing business in Santa Monica. Now I would absolutely look into it. But the reason we did not was due to the hedge that was existing on the property, that it was 15 feet tall. And if you go, like, even before I lived in the area, driving through the streets over there are enough homes that have hedges where it didn't dawn on me that that might be an actual law in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the applicant before hearing from the public? Commissioner Kennedy?
During your testimony, you said that had you known, you would have sought the proper channels. Are you saying that if you didn't known that, you would have installed hedges only that comply with the height requirement?
Well, I think what we would have done was come into the city, speak with the planning department, apply for a hedge height modification before any work was done, and have these conversations prior to the project being completed. And then if it was denied at the time, then yes, we would have installed a hedge that was in compliance.
Or can I say something too? Because we talked about this a lot before we decided upon the 7-foot hedge. They also did our previous home, so we've worked with them in the past. And it would have been nice to have the choice to know at the time and say, well, if you take this down, you're not going to be able to replace it. So maybe we would have left what was there and cleaned it up. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but by asking us now to go down to 42 inches, it really defeats the whole purpose. And then, we have no privacy at all compared to what was existing before that was allowed to be there without any complaints. So,
thank you.
Okay, if there are no additional questions at this time, let's go on and hear from the public. I have 3 requests to speak. Sonia Sultan, Bruce Sultan, and Jerry Rubin. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes each. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Sonia Fox Sultan. I live at 532 17th Street. As indicated in our September 15th letter to you, my husband, Bruce Sultan, who's right here, and I are 25-year residents of Santa Monica. For over 18 years, we have owned our home at 532 17th Street, directly south of the subject property. When I run out of time, he's going to take over and complete our joint statement. This appeal is, in effect, a test of whether or not our hedge ordinance, enacted with so much public and staff input and careful consideration by council, can and will be enforced to protect our community, or whether it can be disregarded by someone, even someone very nice and polite, who buys a home in Santa Monica, decides they want to wall off their property with a hedge like the ones that we can all see in Brentwood or Beverly Hills or Bel Air, and then just goes ahead and plants the hedge despite the ordinance. Over 1 year ago, the purchasers of 530 17th Street cut down all the trees and plants in the front yard. I agree that was unfortunate, including 50-year-old palm trees. They brought in huge ficus plants in boxes, and they dug a ditch along the front and sides of the property line and planted 30 ficus in a row to form a tall, dense hedge. When the city cited them and ordered them to trim the front hedge to the required 42 inches, they demanded a modification, a variance, to enable them to retain the hedge they planted in defiance of the law and in complete disregard of all the 17th Street neighbors, many of whom have written letters and spoken at the previous hearing, who all oppose the hedge as we do because it undermines the sense of beauty, safety, and neighborliness of our community. No one else on our block has a hedge. What we do have is a wide parkway with beautiful, mature giant magnolias and other trees, and very friendly neighbors who take pride in maintaining lovely gardens, many of them sustainable, open to the view of those who jog by or walk their dog or push their child in a stroller or use a walker or roll by in a wheelchair. The hedge in question is incompatible with the landscaping and other improvements on nearby properties. In fact, it stands out like an eyesore among the neighboring properties on 17th Street, all of which comply with local ordinance. The height of the hedge in question is injurious to the properties in the vicinity in that it blocks the flow of light and air and undermines the sense of safety and walkability so valued in our community. The hedge in question impairs the integrity of the neighborhood as it walls off that one residence from what is otherwise an open, welcoming, and walkable streetscape.
Thank you. Mr. Sultan,
You're
up.
Thank you. The landscaper and the owner admit they were unaware of the ordinance, and it's unfortunate that they did not do their homework before cutting down the existing trees, which were really beautiful, and you could see through them all the way to the house. They were very leafy, and they blew in the wind. It was gorgeous. The landscaper claims he simply replaced the existing hedge that was an eyesore, but as I said, that really was not the case. Until 2014, there was never a hedge at 530 17th Street. If there had been, we, the 17th Street neighbors, would have objected, as we're doing now. Approximately 8 years ago, the previous owners planted a number of small trees, which were dispersed throughout the front yard, and over those years, those trees grew taller, but they were not lined up along the property line to form a hedge. There was no hedge, only a variety of trees, rose bushes, and other plants, none of which formed a hedge. You can see from the 2014 real estate listing photos previously provided to you that the front yard had an open, airy look, which was compatible with the surrounding homes and neighborhood. The current hedge, now nearly 8 feet tall, I measured it myself this morning, is most definitely not compatible. After this appeal hearing, which was continued from September, the applicant obtained and provided some letters in support of their tall hedge from their friends or associates of theirs who live in Santa Monica, but they don't live on 17th Street or anywhere near the hedge in question. Those letters ask the applicants be allowed to retain their hedge so that their front yard can remain insulated, enclosed, and private, which is precisely what the hedge ordinance was designed to protect against. The applicants and their one small child live in a 7,000 square foot house, 3 stories high, which is completely enclosed and private in their backyard. They're not entitled to also wall off the front yard from the community and by doing so negatively impact our neighborhood. We respectfully request that you deny the appeal, uphold the zoning administrator's ruling, and order the oversized hedge brought into compliance without further delay. In summary, the hedge in question violates the ordinance, is incompatible with nearby landscaping, injurious to the properties in the vicinity, and impairs the integrity of our neighborhood. Thank you for your attention to this matter and for your service to the community.
Thank you.
Bingo.
Nice timing. Mr. Rubin.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Barry, Commissioners, Jerry Rubin. Just like to make a couple points on both sides of the issue. first of all, I don't think if I was living there and I was walking by and it would, I'd feel unsafe if I walked by a hedge. I really understand, even through the whole hedge debate over the years, why it's respectful to allow a homeowner who wants privacy to be able to have privacy. Not many people might choose that, but I don't think it's fair to say, hey, if you want to have privacy so your kids could play, or for whatever reason, that's unfair because we want to be able to walk by and see what's going on in your yard. I just don't think that's a good thing. And I like hedges. I like green hedges. I didn't know what was there before, and I have a feeling I wouldn't have liked to see the trees and bushes torn down. Just saying, clean it up. And I do understand that there's a process that you're supposed to go through. I just feel that a taller hedge in a community where a lot of traffic comes by and where people are walking, and if someone really wants the privacy, as I had said before, but we're not dealing with that now. The ordinance is already stated. I don't know what you're going to do. I guess I made my complete point right there, and I wish everyone, I hope there's some solution that comes out, and I still think it would be better to hear this if you had a full commission hear these appeals rather than just some of you here. I know that it's better when there's a full commission to give everyone equal opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. So now the applicant has 3 minutes to respond to issues raised during public testimony.
Thank you. First, let me say, Mr. and Mrs. Sultan, my name is Ryan Levine. I live next door to you. It's nice to meet you.
I ask that you address the commission.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Sorry. The point is, I've lived there for over a year. I've never met them.
Did you know that? I'm sorry. If I could interrupt, if we could stop the timer on the applicant's presentation, if I could ask everyone in the audience to please refrain from speaking during testimony. Thank you. Please proceed.
That's my fault. Sorry. But the point is that I've never met them. I've lived there for over a year. We moved in, and I think before we planted those trees, we had actually lived there at least a couple months. Never met them. I walk my dog every morning, almost every night. Never met them. So the point is that to say that this somehow, I'm walling off and creating some sort of castle and I've built a moat in front and I'm not welcoming. I mean, we moved in last year, I think, a week or two before Halloween, or maybe maybe it was about a month before Halloween. Anyway, the point is that these neighbors of mine are saying that they've lived there for 18. I would have loved to have had a conversation with them, and I think the pictures tell the story. They think it's an eyesore. We don't. They think that it creates, it's injurious to the property. I don't think that. As homeowners, I would hope that our wishes would be respected. It's unfortunate that we didn't know about the ordinance, but again, I think it comes down to what was existing before. And in our opinion, this has the same effect as what was there before, but actually looks better. And that's why we did it. So thank you again for your time.
And just a few comments about this actual block that the home is on. There are I know one home for certain that there is a hedge. It's actually just across the street and 2 or 3 doors down. It is slightly set back from the sidewalk, but they do have a hedge that is right around 7 feet. And if you walk the entire street of 17th Street, there's at least 12 to 15 hedges. And then also, and it's actually noted in the staff report that there is at least one registered hedge on that portion.
And the home that I think he's referring to, they have a big trampoline in their front yard, and their kids are older, but their kids are always out there playing and jumping on the trampoline. So again, it's the same reason. It just seems arbitrary to not allow us to have a 7-foot hedge when there are other hedges that exist on the street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the appellant? Okay. Any questions of staff from commissioners? Okay, see no questions. Commissioner Kennedy, you have a question for staff?
Do you know if the other hedges that the appellant is discussing, if they are already if they already received their modifications, or they're grandparented, or what the deal is?
So perhaps Michael can answer this, but they didn't reference the address, so I don't know. But in your staff report on page 8, there is the site plan of the area that identifies legal registered sites with overheight fences, walls, or hedges. So that might give you some information about what is there legally. So I don't know if the one referenced is a legal one or an illegal one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify. Sorry. I do have a slide here. There, just passed it up. This is what's in your staff report. It's on page 8, and it shows the existing registered fences that are in the 17th Street. The subject block right there, the one that's in that one only has it has 3 on that site. I mean, I'm sorry, 3 on that actual block there, which would be the next door neighbor at it's 522, I believe, which has a 50-inch hedge, and then the other two are on the street corner lots there at 6. I'm sorry, I can't read it up here. 6. I think it's 625 and 634. So those ones also have legally registered hedges as well, and those I think are measuring. I think it's in the staff report actually. I hear it's at 48 inches in height.
And the registration that happened, or I should say the registration process included reaching out to those properties on that street?
Correct. During the 2005 to 2007 period, there was a 2-year window where any property owner could file for a non-conforming hedge, fence, or wall that was over height. It was open every time the property owner would file like an application. It was open for review, though it was either approved or denied. But yes, these are the ones that were legally that went through the actual legal process. So,
got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, Commissioner Newbold?
The city, if I remember correctly, the city doesn't go around citing homeowners with hedges that are too high. It solely operates on neighbor complaints.
It's all complaint driven. So if we get a complaint filed, then we have to act upon it. Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'll go ahead and close the hearing, and the matter is now before us. I'd like to call for a motion on the item. Commissioner Fresco.
I move that we deny the appeal and adopt the findings in the staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Well, I
yes,
would like to
Commissioner Fonda Bernardi.
introduce a couple of other ideas here. One, we did have this legal window, which obviously doesn't affect the appellant because he's 10 years later. But a 42-inch height is not unusual. Many cities have that. It's almost a standard. You know, you see it all over in planning codes. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, you know, the numbers, it's the tail of the tape. They are relatively infrequent. And so we want to move as rapidly as, let's say, humanly possible to bring our city into conformance to these codes that have been generated from tremendous public input and planning and staff effort and so on and so forth. So when something like this comes up, I think we have to, if there are no pressing exceptions, we have to hew to the leather of law to do that obligation that we have to move our city as quickly as possible to where we'd want to be, so that at the end of the day, and we would be all in conformance, even though knowing that that's physically impossible. When we have an opportunity, we have to take it.
Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Fresco?
I really believe that a 42-inch hedge contributes to a better neighborhood and a better community. I think that it enables people to eventually, maybe not in a couple months, but after a few more months, to eventually end up walking out of their house at the same time, see each other, allows people to see into each other's yards for safety reasons at night. A neighbor could happen to come home late and see something going on in a yard if they're able to see in. So I think that there are a lot of community and safety reasons to uphold this ordinance, and I think that the exceptions that are provided are significant and have a pretty high bar. When I don't live in that neighborhood, but I've certainly been on many hundreds, I would say, of site visits in that neighborhood over the years, and I think the most frequent, the greatest amount of traffic generated by non-residents is probably gardeners, is what I'm trying to say, and construction workers. So I think it's important that we really keep that bar high, that there's not an adjacent use that would impact the quality of life of this applicant, and that the character of the neighborhood is a really important thing to protect.
And I'll speak to the motion. I cannot make the findings that are being asked of us here tonight. And as Commissioner Fresco stated, there are very important reasons for the hedge ordinance and the findings being crafted the way they are. And while not a part of my thinking on my determination here, I just want to note that it's unfortunate that the two parties directly involved in this haven't interacted, and part of the hedge ordinance goal is to create stronger connections and stronger sense of neighborhood. So those are my comments. Commissioner Newbold.
And I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. I guess I will add, though, I am sympathetic to the homeowner. I understand that there is this perception, and he is not alone, of wanting to have sort of a more private front yard. That's why we did have all these big debates about the hedge ordinance. I raised children in that area, and without a big hedge, and I think the idea is to make it a more friendly, open neighborhood, and so I'm sympathetic, but at the end of the day, I have to rule with my fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Kennedy.
The comment that I would make before we vote is that, as I mentioned earlier, I walk or jog on this block maybe once a week, and I do so because it's flat all the way from San Vicente to Montana. But my experience in that neighborhood is that everything is really open, and when I'm usually on the other side of the street than this side, but I can see the houses, and it's part of my routine to look at them. And I was surprised to hear when the appellant was talking about the other hedges, because what has been my experience. I've noticed that actually it's very open, and there aren't a lot of big walled off homes on that street.
So if there's no further discussion, I'll ask staff to call the roll.
Commissioner Fondo Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Fresca?
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes.
Commissioner Newbold?
Yes.
Chair Perry?
Yes. So that appeal is denied. And that concludes 9A and takes us to 9B.
Chair, as was last time, I will not be advising you in this, and Heidi will be up in this shortly.
So we are going to wait for the city attorney to take her place at the dais. Okay, so I believe that we are all in place now. So we'll begin 9B, and I will start by adding to my disclosures. There were quite a few given at the last meeting. I have a couple additional disclosures that occurred to me after the last hearing on this item. I've made financial contributions to the appellant's political campaigns in the past, so I wanted to state that. And I'm applying to schools for my son, and the school that one of the applicants works for is among those schools. Neither of these circumstances interferes with my impartial assessment of the proposal and does not constitute a conflict, but I felt it appropriate to disclose. Are there any others that commissioners would like to add? Yes, Commissioner Fresco.
I received a phone call yesterday afternoon from Margaret Bach, and I spoke to her for about a half an hour. Basically, the substance of the conversation is summarized in her letter to us that came after the conversation.
Okay. Are there any other ex parte communication disclosures to add? Okay. So I understand that the appellant wishes to request a continuance, and in order for us to grant a continuance, it needs to be the applicants need to agree, and the commission needs to agree. I would like to begin by asking the appellant to make their request to us directly, and then I'll ask the applicants to speak.
Good evening. It was my understanding there would be 7 commissioners here tonight. That was my understanding after the last meeting, because the one commissioner who wasn't here last time had led me to believe she would be here this time, and now there's a second person, and that seems to me on something that's been an 8-year dispute where you both have me asking for one thing and now the property owners asking yet for something else as well, that it makes it very difficult to resolve that. And it seems to me that this would be in the best interest of all parties involved to have a full commission to hear the item.
And so now I'd like to ask the applicant to share your thoughts on the, whether you agreed to the requested continuance.
Thank you, Commissioners. We would prefer not to continue the item.
Okay. So it's my understanding that without the agreement of both the applicant, appellant, and the commission, that this matter is before us and would need to be heard this evening. So unfortunately, we cannot grant the request for the continuance. We'll move forward with the item. And I will state that in the past, traditionally, we have heard items with 5 commissioners here, but certainly your request is understandable. And so with that, if staff would please present the report.
Yes, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Grace Page, Associate Planner, serving as the Architectural Review Board Liaison, and tonight is the continued hearing of the ARB appeal that was brought before the Planning Commission just last month on September 16th. I'll quickly provide a recap of the background information of the site. The subject application is Hollister in the Ocean Park 2 zoning district. It's on a 12,000 square foot parcel developed with a 4-unit landmark project, commonly referred to as Horatio West Court. The subject building is a single-family structure with the address of 142 Hollister, so all 5 units are on one parcel here. The single-family structure is also deemed a structure of merit and also a historic resource to the city. On February 2nd, the Architectural Review Board reviewed the request to rehabilitate the rear facade by replacing 2 rear doors with windows and to provide for a new paint color scheme for the building. On February 10th, a timely appeal was filed. The statement that was provided in the appeal took issue with the bulleted items on the screen. It had to do with not agreeing with the findings that the ARB had made, particularly findings A and C. The appellant also felt that the design was architecturally, contextually, and socially incompatible. There were also comments and concerns about safety, open space, and sustainability of the project. And there are also statements about the accountability of the applicant and owner. The appeal was continued by the Planning Commission to a date certain, which was today. And the Commission had provided statements with the following. Retaining the dimensionality of the door opening was suggested. There were also comments to create articulation and enhance the functionality of the rear facade, as well as a suggestion to increase the permeability of the design. In response, the applicant has provided a revised design, which is showcased in the lower right-hand corner. And the color coding is there to sort of to illustrate how the applicant has responded. So in terms of retaining the dimensionality of the door openings, it's highlighted in purple. They're now providing for 2 custom-made windows that are more alike in the door height and fit that opening. They also looked at creating some additional articulation. So these custom windows are casement windows where the upper panes now swing outward instead of the double hung windows that were provided in the scheme in the lower left-hand corner. So that is creating a sense of articulation. And in addition to articulating the facade, the applicant has also provided some trim around the windows to unify all the different arrangement, and then provided a white paint color scheme to give it some definition. Permeability was also increased by enhancing the size of the windows as well. This one moment. And I can remove the colors there just to give you an idea of how that would appear without the color coding. At the last meeting, staff had recommended supporting the ARB's conditional approval, which is depicted on the left-hand side. And the applicant's revised design is shown on the right-hand side. Staff feels that the revised design further improves upon the ARB's conditional approval, and that the larger outward opening windows and proposed paint scheme provide to address the Planning Commission's comments as well. Staff has included a condition requiring the applicant to basically give us some additional details. We want to see the actual details of the custom window, how the header would be replaced or repaired, and then to understand how the paint would be applied to the surface to ensure that all that work is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So they would give us a detailed description of how they would treat the facade, how they would apply the paint, and so on. All work is conditioned to be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards, and that's so that it doesn't adversely impact the structure merit. So as reflected in the draft statement of official action in the report, staff asserts that the ARB findings for the design proposal can be made, and the design is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. As such, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission uphold the appeal and approve the applicant's revised project. And the alternative actions that are also shown in the staff report are to either articulate revised findings and or conditions to approve or deny, with or without prejudice, or the Planning Commission could decide to remand the design back to the architectural review with or without specific direction. I also just want to provide a reminder from the last meeting that the Planning Commission cannot compel the applicant to propose a second floor balcony. Other issues and disputes about, building compliance or conditions and parking are not before the Planning Commission. Tonight is really about just the design that's being proposed before you. And that concludes my presentation.
At this point, Commissioner Newbold.
I just want to make sure that I understand. If we vote to uphold the appeal and approve the revised submittal, this is what will go forward, the new design.
Right, what's depicted on the right-hand side.
If we deny the appeal, where does that leave everybody? I just don't quite understand what if we deny this.
If you uphold the appeal, the ARB decision stands.
Not this.
Correct. We're recommending.
If you uphold,
right here it says.
Backwards? I'm sorry.
I think so.
Yeah, I did get that backwards.
If we deny the appeal, the original design is what stands.
Correct.
Thank you.
The original design being the one on the left on the screen.
Correct, as conditioned by the Architecture Review Board.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fresco.
So does that mean that if the upholding or denying of the appeal is kind of a separate function from accepting this design? Are they two separate things?
Well, what's before you this evening is the design on the right, and so we're recommending you uphold the appeal simply because it's at variance with the Architecture Review Board's approval. So in addition to that, the applicant has proposed revised drawings, which you see on the right. So if you follow staff's recommendation, you would be approving
the proposed project on the right.
So if you uphold the appeal, that means that you accept this design?
If you simply uphold the appeal, I'm going to get this backwards again. If you simply uphold the appeal, you're reverting back to the Architecture Review Board's approval. If the revised drawings, you're approving the drawings on the right.
No, so if we deny the appeal, we go back to ARB. If we uphold the appeal by itself, then there's no project. If we uphold the appeal with the revised drawings, so those are the three choices.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's different than what I think. So if we deny the appeal, what happens?
ARB.
They go back to ARB.
Yeah, they'd have to go back to ARB with a new design and try to get that through ARB again, which
Gotcha.
would then be subject to further appeal.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And that would be a brand new application, new filing fee.
If we
new
deny
process.
the appeal, that's what happens.
If
I'd like
we
clarification on that because
No,
that's
it's
not
if
what
we
it says
uphold
here.
Yeah.
Chair, that's not what the
The
alternative
appeal
action
says they didn't like the ARB thing, so if we uphold the appeal, then we don't like the ARB thing either.
That's correct.
So if we uphold the appeal, then it has to, but we don't do this, then it goes back to ARB with an all-new application. If we uphold the appeal and we do this, then it's over.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Say it again. I'm so sorry, but I think say what you just said again. I get if we uphold the appeal and approve this, I get that.
Uphold the appeal, but don't approve that, all-new application.
Gotcha.
Deny the appeal, ARB.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Okay.
Well, I just have a question about the alternative action A2 because it doesn't specifically say anything about upholding, approving, or denying. So can you elaborate on alternative A2? I just want to make sure I completely understand.
So alternative action A2 is remanding it back to the Architectural Review Board. And you can remand it back to the ARB because you need cause to do that, reason to do that. There's been new information presented this evening, the proposed drawings on the right. You could remand it back to the ARB with or without specific direction to pay particular attention to some aspect that you may want them to focus on.
And that's different from the options that also have a vote to either uphold or deny the appeal.
It's very similar to one of them. The difference would be they wouldn't have to file a new application.
If we remand it.
Correct.
Oh, so that's a fourth option.
Yes. That's why I wanted to bring that up. Okay. Okie dokie.
Commissioner Fresco, and then
Oh, no,
okay,
I-
and then
Oh,
Commissioner
I'm sorry.
Newbold.
I knew she didn't want to ask
Good.
a question. So if they have to file a new application, that's a whole new fee for them.
That's correct.
Commissioner Fondo Bernard.
I don't think there is a fee because it's on a lot that is. Does the fee travel with the structure of merit or with the landmark?
Staff.
Yeah, the city doesn't waive fees for structures of merit.
Okay.
This is a landmark parcel, and there's a donut
Cut out
with a
for
structure
the-
of merit in the middle.
Got it. Okay.
Other questions of staff? I wanted to ask staff to comment. One of the points raised by the appellant is that there are certain sustainability considerations within this, and is tying them to the Secretary of Interior standards, Secretary of Interior recommendations related to sustainable technologies. Do you see an appropriate application for those ideas within this project?
Sustainability can be achieved in many different avenues. The doors that I believe the appellant has been pointing out in terms of sustainability, they're not original to the structure. The replacement proposal provides for glazing that allows for light. It allows for functionality for ventilation. they're larger windows now, and so you can manipulate the environment. You can vent. You can let the breeze in, and in terms of how much light the rooms may get is probably comparable to that of the doors that are there now. So staff does not believe that sustainability is impacted with the revised design.
Okay, and then the recommendations from the Secretary of the Interior, do they have bearing within this when we're dealing with the structure of merit? I mean, is there...
The structure of merit needs to be consistent with those guidelines. So, I mean, I think if you want to further elaborate on that, I mean, that doesn't... They need to be consistent.
They are guidelines, and to the extent you can adapt a sustainable approach, one should. It's recommended, but we believe that there's no detrimental impact to the sustainability of the structure. It might be argued that the previous balcony acted like a light shelf or created a microclimate, but the previous balcony is not before you tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Fresco, your light is on.
It is this time.
Okay.
I just wanted to kind of clarify what you just said. I think that standard from the rehabilitation guidelines about sustainability of the building has to do with ways that the building was originally built that are inherently sustainable, such as vents and attics and ways there's circulation in the building. And I don't think that this project applies to what we're talking about here, because these aren't original features to the building. So that would be my opinion.
Okay. Thank you. A question for staff from Commissioner Kennedy.
A clarifying question about the proposal. The revised design, the windows only open on the top and not the bottom, or are they also open on the bottom?
The panes on the lower half are fixed.
Okay.
And that's to act like a guardrail so that you don't have an unsafe condition where, say, you might take a spill out of it.
I see.
Other questions? Okay, so let's go on and hear from the appellant first for a maximum of 15 minutes.
While this is being arranged, I realize there's one more legal question that had to do with continuance that I'd like to ask before my time starts, and that is that the applicants did not properly notice this meeting. While the meeting was noticed for the September 16th, the date was not changed, and I would like to hear you ask the attorneys whether that matters, because the last time that we had a continuance, a new date was put. And indeed, if it hasn't been noticed properly, I believe it needs to be continued, because the public in my neighborhood hasn't had a right to be noticed of this meeting and attend.
Right. So here we had a discussion that was continued to a date certain. In that situation, is additional notice required?
No. Since it was continued to a date certain, additional notice was not required. I believe it was noticed in the paper as well. So we feel it's been adequately noticed.
Yeah, I just wanted the red part. Yeah.
Okay, we're ready when you are.
We were just making sure that that was seeable. Okay. Good evening, and commissioners and staff. At your September 16th meeting, you asked the applicant to come back with a proposal that had articulation and permeability. And as I've written to you, I don't believe that the applicant's response is responsive. It does not have dimensionality. You were very clear about that. It doesn't have meaningful permeability. You went over and over and talked about how the permeability had to have articulation, how the articulation itself had to have historic dimensionality, and the historic dimensionality on this property has either been a rear second floor balcony between 50 and 80 inches deep, or a first floor deck, which who knows how large, but certainly at least those kind of dimensions. And simply a paint job and changing from double hung windows to a window that opens is nothing like that kind of articulation. And therefore I believe that the response is non-responsive. And unfortunately, the staff report did not faithfully reflect your direction at the previous meeting. It glossed over the level of permeability and dimensionality that you asked for. I think that's very unfortunate. And nevertheless, I sent you copies of a transcription, a paraphrasing of your minutes, and I think it's very clear that this is a non-responsive, and a paint job should not be a con job. They haven't really changed what they are proposing. One of the findings you have to make is this is in good design, and because it doesn't, from a historical perspective, reflect that kind of dimensionality, it simply isn't good design and should be turned down simply to start with on that basis, even if there were not other reasons to do so. Then, second of all, I wanted to raise this question about sustainability and respectfully differ with one of the commissioners there. When you look at this text up here, historic building construction methods and materials often maximize natural heating and ventilation to respond to local climatic conditions. The key to a successful rehabilitation project is to identify and understand any existing energy efficient aspects of the historic building, not simply original, but existing. It says lost original and existing, to ensure that they are preserved. The most sustainable building may be one that already exists. Thus, good preservation practice is often synonymous with sustainability. Whenever a historic building is rehabilitated, it is important to utilize the building's inherently sustainable qualities. This means specifically that the existing sustainability that the building provides, which those open doorways provide, many is beyond simply putting back the old deck, that the doorways could remain in place. The treatment by the property owners degrades that sustainability. So not only is that a design question in Santa Monica, in a city that takes sustainability seriously, but this contradicts the Secretary of the Interior standards. It just does. It's there in black and white. And I can tell you, despite staff saying who doesn't live in the house and doesn't know the reality, what the property owners have already done by filling up half of that space with the pegboard and cutting back the light and air significantly is the reality is it's colder when it's cold and it's hotter when it's hot. It's real life reality. So the fact is it does degrade the sustainability, and this should be turned down on a design basis for that reason in this city, in a climate change world, and it should be turned down because it violates the Secretary of Interior standards. They are applicable, and staff cannot cherry pick and try and use these standards to talk about their narrow vision of compatibility and then ignore where it applies here. Furthermore, we're not just talking about a building, but the issue, the house that I live in has thin walls with no insulation. It is in the 40s in the winter in that house because it gets cold in those few weeks when it's really cold. And part of the ability, the passive solar action that we have there now, or we had at least in the past when one could walk out the doors, is it's both letting the heat in, but it's the occupant being able to go out on the deck in the morning and warm up themselves, because sustainability isn't there in a neutron bomb world where nobody lives. It's there for people. So closing up the back of the house significantly degrades the sustainability, and that's not something that we allow in this city. Third, in terms of not providing usable open space. The fact is, in 2010, when this was at the ARB told the applicant the staff opposed that before because it wasn't usable open space. Now, they had actually proposed somewhat of a small deck, 18 inches deep at the time, but staff recommended against that because it wasn't usable space. In Santa Monica, a matter of good design, especially in the South Beach Tract, where you have narrow lots and there's no other opportunity for private open space, good design includes providing open space. And this project both has landmarks aspects to it, preservation aspects, but it also has basic livability aspects. And to close up this back of the house and not gain any usable open space at all, when there's no other chance to do so in the parcel, is a design that we would never recommend to anybody. It flat out is bad design. One of the findings you have to make is whether it is good design. And again, a little paint job doesn't make a good design. There are functional issues that are serious in this community that we take seriously. Then you get into the question about whether it's compatible. And again, staff tries to cherry pick and just say, oh, compatibility and Secretary of Interior standards. Compatibility, the actual code says, is compatible with developments on land and in the general area. So it has to be not just, it might look that kind of window is compatible with the wall in this kind of building, but it means the general area. You have had testimony from both neighbors behind the house who feel that this is an insult and clashes with the architectural style, with the social function between rear decks, undermines the mini courtyard area that we have in the back, which everybody says we're trying to preserve in this city. So on immediate compatibility, you have a strong imperial record that this violates, for the people who live near it, their whole sense of community, that it is incompatible for them. You have to make that finding, and you cannot make that finding in what the property owners are proposing, because it is a cold, boxy, closed-in approach that closes the house off to its immediate neighbors. It also closes off to the South Beach Track. The South Beach Track is well known for second-floor rear decks. They either are original or they have become adaptive. And as one commissioner said last time, we're seeing a structure of merit here a landmark cannibalize the structure of merit. The fact is, these second floor rear decks that have been all over our neighborhood mark what the South Beach Track is about. And staff may argue that they know what's going to come out of a public process when this eventually goes to a historic district. They don't know, and they're prejudging. And the fact is, there are so many of these decks as an adaptive development over time as this neighborhood has filled in, and you would be condoning tearing that down here and eliminating on a building that's supposed to have some level of protection, but also simply from a design issue. This is not compatible with the neighborhood, and what they are proposing, as pretty as their little colors are now because they got a better architect, doesn't mean that it's compatible. And those are the findings that you have to make in servicing this community. So you have, by the way, there's no time I'm showing here. How much do I have? I have 6 more minutes. You know, I just want to touch on process for a moment. As much as staff is telling you that you can't take any of this into account, it's been very disturbing in the last couple of weeks since your last meeting, what I've found out. When this was turned down by ARB, when they couldn't get a permit to tear down the deck in 2010, at that point, code compliance was supposed to do something. They were supposed to enforce at that point. Code compliance did nothing. A year and a half later, the property owners tore down the deck illegally of a structure of merit, of an appendage on a structure of merit. I reported it to planning staff within 3 weeks. It happened during a holiday period. I reported it within 3 weeks. They did nothing. There was never a compliance order listed at that point about a deck being illegally torn down. I continued to meet with staff for a couple of years. They never did anything. Then I only found out that in 2013 that code compliance said that they had resolved the original termite issue by the illegal doorway that they put in now. But then that wasn't listed as a code compliance issue until I complained about it again a year and a half later. So staff basically has, instead of this being in my favor, has not enforced when they failed to get, when they were turned down at ARB. They weren't enforced upon when they were supposed to be at that point. A year and a half later, they tear the deck down illegally, and staff does nothing. There's never another compliance order issued at that point. Then it's signed off months later as they've resolved everything. And nobody ever told me, and I only read about it in the September 16 staff report, and then it was only listed as a new violation when I complained a year and a half later. So one of you asked before about whether this is setting a precedent. The fact is, here's a structure of merit that has been illegally altered in order to shift the context. And staff keeps telling you, you can't talk about anything else than what they proposed. This is like when a crime is committed in a county and a slick attorney gets it shifted to another county, a different jurisdiction, because they're going to get a different verdict. They broke the law. They were not enforced on by the city. They have changed the context for the debate illegally. And now you're sitting there and they're telling you your hands are tied. This is de novo. And you had every right at the last meeting to ask something that was truly permeable and was truly articulated. And this is not. This is a joke. And you need to take this context into account here. You are the last defense. The attorneys, the code compliance, the planning department has not enforced the law in this community. And if you approve what they're proposing today, you're telling people in this community you can rip off historic resources without public process. It's not okay. It's really not okay. And I have tried to be cool, and I have tried not to sit and sue the city at this point. I've thought that people would treat me fairly and treat this process and this building fairly, and they have not. And all of you know what it's like to be on this side of the dais as well on that side. And I hope you are as outraged as I am about this. So in the end, this is not just a landmarks-related, preservation-related issue. It has those dimensions, and it is important to look at, okay, is it recalling what was there? And I don't believe it does recall what was there, because it doesn't go three-dimensional, and it's not articulated, and it's not permeable like has been since it was built in 1902. That's true, but there are other planning issues as well. And number C, of the findings that you have to make, C specifically goes beyond whether this just has some nice landmark aspect. C says proposed design of the building or structure is compatible with developments on land in the general area. And you have heard from the people who live behind it, you have heard from people who have lived in this neighborhood for decades, that it is not compatible. And even if you thought it did catch a whimsical way of reflecting the historical yada yada, the fact is it's not compatible with the neighborhood. And the Planning Commission in 2001 at the New Urban West project on Hollister at the corner used this same compatibility to ask for a substantial redesign. Now, staff tells you, oh, it's easier to do with new construction than it is here. Well, the fact is, that was a multi-million-dollar, three-house project that was massively redesigned. All we're talking about here is keeping the doors open and sending them back to ask for a design that keeps the doors open, that keeps that sustainability aspect. It's much easier here to try and find an approach that is compatible with the neighborhoods. You cannot make finding C. What they are proposing closes itself off to everybody and everything and to the natural environment. And nobody would recommend that in this city coming here for in the first place. So any more time, or is that it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from the applicant for a maximum of 15 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Margaret McLean. I'm not sure if there's anything else that I can add. You've seen our proposal. We tried our best to understand the discussion that you had at the last Planning Commission meeting and to interpret your suggestions in a way that we thought was consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards and the other concerns that have been raised. And we felt that we were giving it our best shot. So I'm I'd like to thank staff for their work on the report and just request that you look at our proposal in light of what you understand as your responsibilities here. And but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those. But I think our case is clear enough, unless you have questions about what we're intending to do or hoping to do.
Questions? Commissioner Fresco.
Hi. Can you just explain the purpose or the motivation around the white rectangle, the painted area, and the molding that surrounds it?
Well, I think if you remember in the last Planning Commission meeting, there was some concern by one or two members that the position of the existing old windows, yeah, maybe we should show a picture. The existing old double hung windows and the doorways and the two kind of slotted windows on the first floor, it's kind of a bit of a disarray, and that rectangle is just kind of to corral those design elements and to kind of focus the attention on the window area rather than four sort of oddly placed windows. So it was just an attempt to visually, for some sort of visual coherence.
Other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi.
Yeah, I know we're not allowed to use the B word here, but I have to ask this question. Is there any reason you object to a balcony?
Yes.
Might you explain yourself? I mean,
I'm not sure we really need to.
So this will be a mystery in a sense. We
we
will never know.
It's a 7 or 8 year long conversation.
Right. Because it can't be the money, because we've spent more money chasing our tails for all these years that we could have if it was a financial reason.
No. That's not the case at all.
Okay,
No.
then that's off the road. Then what is the concern?
Well, I don't really want to open this Pandora's box again, but the original, or the former balcony, not to say original because it was not original to the house, it was very poorly designed. It was built without a permit. It was inherently dangerous, not to mention the damage over time, deterioration over time. And in order to construct a balcony of a similar size would require a much heavier, much more robust design than had been there. And that would impede, that would require that the balcony be built out into the parking area behind the house, which wasn't our decision to make this a parking area with a rental house. This was done in the 50s.
No, I think it was a wonderful decision so that the court could have parking.
Right.
And I think it was very forward thinking of the previous owners to make sure they had access to that.
Well, they knew what they were doing.
But along the way, another building was sacrificed to parking, and we're trying to keep that building alive.
So are we.
That's what this whole conversation is
that's
about.
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
And so the building lost all of its front balconies. Those were enclosed. It has no private open space. And a balcony of even very modest proportions would not be technically unfeasible. I mean, we've had a couple of conversations about that, and I'm just looking at it and saying, isn't this the obvious solution? I bet there's something holding it up. And I would like to know what, because the last charge was very specific. Show us articulation. Articulation means planes that don't line up, things that are of a different shape that create some dramatic interest. And what we have here is very planar in a sense. So there could be many things that could articulate a building, but the first one most people would reach for naturally on a building like this would be a balcony. But there would be other choices which you would.
We tried to come up with one that worked for.
What was that?
That's what you're seeing here.
But it's so planar. It meets the permeability. You can see through it, but it doesn't meet the articulation, which was also important.
We felt that the windows that we are proposing did approach that.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll hear from members of the public. Jerry Rubin, we have 3 requests. Jerry Rubin, Cordula Oman, and Penny Fisk. And each of you has a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you very, very much, Chair Parry and Commissioners. Well, I was at a previous meeting and then I watched another one on CityTV, and I live a few blocks away. And I think what Commissioner Bernardi was saying, this seems like a simple solution. I'm a little bit disappointed in the applicants not even accepting the request to postpone this until there are 7 commissioners. It just seemed like a fair thing, and that was not done. I don't even think that's a good process. I think it should be revisited. The other thing was at the one of the previous meetings, the applicants were saying because Michael Feinstein's a former mayor, that's going to work in his favor. And I think you all have a lot of integrity, and Chair Parry, during disclosures, said that he would be able to judge this, but I almost think that inadvertently even, the fact that Michael Feinstein was a former mayor could work against him. And I know the city staff is not going to do that, and I know you are, but in some ways, I thought it was unfair for the applicants to bring that up, and I really hope that, because it does seem logical, we have balconies where my wife and I live, and it's very important. And everything that I've heard in my own mind just sounded like completely reasonable arguments for design, for community, and for process. So I hope you will uphold the appeal. I'm not an attorney. I heard all these options, but I just think the right thing for this commission to do would be to do that. And even the more right thing would be for the applicants to be happy about it and to bring it back there. That balcony, I'm sure, when you talk about the design, it could have been reinforced. You don't have to change it so substantial. There must be some way to make sure it's safe and workable, and all the other things with the door are heeded to. Shouldn't be a fight.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Next speaker, Ms. Oman.
Commissioners, I'm Cordula Oman, and I have lived across from Michael Feinstein for the last 35 years, or 30 years. He moved in a little later. I was here at the last meeting, and you heard my dismay about the balcony tear down, the B word. I like that. And losing that little outdoor space that brings light and warmth to the home of Michael, and free flow of air and light, it's a shame to lose that. I don't understand. I saw a little bit of the report. I don't understand why the owners didn't honor any of the requests that were made. The most important thing I think that concerns me is that something was torn down illegally, and it was done at a time when Michael was out of town. So it's kind of sneaky to me that these things are done like that, especially to a structure of merit. It seems to me that that could set a precedence, and we don't really need to do that. And you guys are the only ones that can prevent that from happening. So I plead with you to deny the owner's design and uphold Michael Feinstein's appeal. And I'm not sure about that upholding, and so I'm sure you'll figure that part out. I think there has to be an amiable solution to that actually respects compatibility with our neighborhood. And when I appealed in 2001, the design at the Urban West that was brought up on Hollister and Ocean, the staff's insistence of compatibility didn't include neighborhood. The Planning Commission took the neighborhood compatibility to heart, and they directed the major redesign of that project, and I'm very proud of that. I think the neighborhood all worked really well together on that. And now everybody's happy. It's a beautiful design, and nobody is unhappy. So I hope you can do the same thing with this. And then, you know, this would truly create a friendly solution and keep the South Bay tract intact and reflect what we feel as Santa Monicans. A little balcony, it's not a big deal. We're not talking about taking over half the parking space, you know, the parking area. It's just a little balcony where I can step out, get some air, stretch, get some sunshine, not feel that he's closed in and can't move in or out and has got to look through a glass cage or something. I don't know. I'm surprised that we're even here again, but I guess that's process. So I hope that can help you. So please think about what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Penny Fisk.
I'm going to read a letter that I sent to the commission.
Even though I already said it, could you say your name for the record?
Penny Fisk, F-I-S-K.
Thank you.
I have to get my glasses. Dear Planning Commissioners, I live at 149 Wadsworth, immediately behind 142 Hollister, since 1999. I'm writing in support of Michael Feinstein's appeal of the proposal that would effectively close off the back of 142 Hollister to our neighborhood. At the rear of my property, I have a large second-floor balcony from which I look directly at the rear of 142 Hollister. The open second-floor doors that are still there, combined with the balcony that used to be there, it was illegally removed by the property's owners, always seem to fit that house and our neighborhood. I like seeing it every day. It just felt like Ocean Park, open to the air and connecting to the neighborhood. By contrast, the current proposal to replace doorways with small windows is an insult to those of us who live nearby. You might not know that there is a mini neighborhood of common rear open space between my house, 145 Wadsworth, 140, 142, and 150 Hollister. All of us have second floor open air rear balconies, except now for 142 Hollister. In addition to shared architectural character among our houses, these rear decks provide a social function where we can see and say hello to each other. That priceless social function flows out of good design and is how I came to know Michael Feinstein, who I probably never would have met without facing rear balconies, even though we live only a block apart. The importance of this design and the social interaction it leads to should not be diminished because it happens at the back of our houses. Rather, that is symbolic of our entire South Beach tract neighborhood, where there are dozens of rear balconies where neighbors see and socialize with each other. When I consider what is proposed for the rear of 142 Hollister, I think, why would someone want to shut off the house and turn this...
Thank you. We have a question from Commissioner Kennedy.
I was just going to ask, because it took a while for her to open her letter, if we could just hear a little bit more before. Can you just continue on a little bit more with your letter?
Okay. While I respect the rights of property owners, as a resident, I also count on the City of Santa Monica to ensure that the neighborhood character and compatibility is not compromised by bad design. What is proposed for 142 Hollister is bad design and would affect me directly and negatively. The past openness was beautiful and inviting.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, so those are the requests that I received from members of the public. So now we go to the applicant, and this is your opportunity to respond to issues raised during public testimony. You have a maximum of 3 minutes. Okay, so the applicant is passing, so that brings us to the appellant. You have 3 minutes.
There's a question about motivation, and as I mentioned at the last meeting, this structure of merit is being cannibalized by a landmark structure because they want the parking at the structure of merit. And the reason that they didn't want to have the earlier support structure there is they thought they could gain an additional parking space. I know that from the diagrams that they showed to the ARB in 2010, and the fact is they went to the planning desk since the ARB meeting and asked for more parking and presented a new map, and it was turned down because now they've given me a letter and they told me that they want to take away my parking in the front of the house because they can't gain it in the back. That's number one, why this is happening. Number two, I've had several letters from them that they didn't like the fact that I dried my clothes on the deck. In a climate change planet, in a sustainable city, yes, I dried my clothes so I didn't have to use electricity. That's part of why this is happening. So we get back to the findings. I do not believe you can make the findings about compatibility, as you heard from Ms. Fisk, as you heard from Mr. Willis, who wrote as well, who lived behind. This is simply not compatible with the neighborhood. And compatibility is not just a landmarks issue, it's also a neighborhoods issue. That's why C is worded as it is about the surroundings. You cannot find that this is compatible. It is entirely incompatible, as well as bad design for all the reasons I mentioned before. It doesn't comply with the Secretary of Interior standards on sustainability, and it's simply not responsive to what you asked for. So I hope that you uphold the appeal and that you don't approve their alternative that, again, is just boxed off. And I know it doesn't work because I live in that functionally now. It doesn't work from a sustainability standpoint. Please don't let this farce happen to our community. It's more than just the back of a house. This is a violation of the social contract of who we are as a neighborhood, breaking laws the way that this has happened. It's just so wrong. And you're the only ones who can stop it at this point.
Okay, so were there any questions for the appellant at this point? No. Okay, so questions for staff? Okay, not seeing any. Oh, yes, Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi.
Could we have just a review of our options, just so we're very clear on, option 1, option 2, option 3. So
sure.
Very
we'll try
clear.
to help clarify.
4, okay.
So there are primarily 4 options, as you indicated. Okay. The first, and it's helpful to remember that Mr. Feinstein was the appellant and was appealing the ARB decision. Okay. So you could uphold the appeal, in which case you'd be sending it back to the ARB, okay, and there'd be a new application filed. You could uphold the appeal and approve the revised drawings that you see on the right, in which case the revised drawings are approved. You could deny the appeal, which means the ARB approval would stand. And then finally, you could remand it back to the ARB, which sends it back to the ARB, and no new application is required.
At the risk of confusing things that are already confusing, there are a couple variations on that. And, well, one, I should note that we could deny by just not being able to get to 4 votes. So that would constitute a technical denial, and the result would be the ARP approval would stand. Another note is that within the option number 2 of upholding and pursuing a revised proposal, that with the concurrence of the applicant and the appellant, it could be continued.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was wondering about the continuance, and I had a feeling that was also an option and makes that a 5th or 6th outcome as you described it.
Commissioner Fresco.
I just want you to say that 5th one again, that we uphold the appeal.
If we upheld,
and then, but we continue, we don't do anything, we just continue it. Wait, tell me.
If we said, and again, this requires the agreement of the applicant and the appellant, if we said, you're on the right track, you haven't gone far enough, we need to see some additional goals achieved with the design, if they were willing to do that, that is an option.
But they both have to
Yes,
agree.
they both have to.
Okay. And if we remand it, then we're not upholding or denying the appeal, we're just remanding.
That's right.
Okay.
And my understanding with the remanding option is that resets the clock. There are not time constraints related to that other than what a brand new project would face, but it would not require new fees.
That's correct. It's essentially the same as upholding the appeal. The primary difference being the property owner would not have to file a new application.
Other questions of staff?
Okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and the matter is before us. Would anyone like to start the discussion with a motion? Commissioner Fresco.
Do we have to start with a motion? Can't we have a conversation first?
If no one has a motion ready, then
I think a conversation is a good way to start. And I'd be willing to jump in.
the floor is yours.
As I wrote on the front page of my notes in 2008, when we designated the structure of merit the elephant in the room, which is not even an elephant, it's in the open discussion now, is that this is an owner-tenant dispute. And I'm not qualified or empowered or in any way interested in resolving an owner-tenant dispute. So I'm just going to look at the building and the neighborhood and what I think the building needs. So basically, this requires probably a lot greater scrutiny on this building than, you know, even a regular review process would be, because it really has to come from where the building is and where we feel it needs to be. This is a structure of merit, but it's also an ARB appeal. And those two factors interact in interesting ways. Typically with landmarks, we don't look at secondary elevations like the rear. But because this is an ARB review and ARB does look at secondary elevations and does ask for things on them, that's what we're looking at. But it's still a structure of merit, and we need to take that into account. Currently in our code, a structure of merit does not go to the Landmarks Commission. It goes to the ARB, and it doesn't get the usual consultant historic review that a landmark would get. But I'm here to tell you that I personally have papered the inside of the planning office with requests to revise the structure of merit designation, as I did that through many years as a landmarks commissioner with I led a landmarks ordinance review committee. So this is most definitely an important thing that the Landmarks Commission has, a position that they've always taken, that is really important, that these buildings should get more careful review than they've been getting. So I don't feel that while the laws currently don't have that level of review, that it's not inconsistent, certainly with the 12 years we've been trying to get that landmarks ordinance revised, Mr. Martin. So that adds another layer. So when I look at the history of this building, and just to add another little thing, as a stopgap measure, that is why the Landmarks Commission has a liaison to the Architectural Review Board, is so that when HRI and structure of merit properties do come up on their agenda, that there is somebody with experience with landmarks who can comment on that. When we look at landmarks and historic resources, our main goal is, and we are looking at changes to them, our main goal is to make sure that the building retains its integrity. And its integrity it's a term of art, and it basically refers to the ability of a building to convey its significance. So what features about it are original? Do they still express the history of the building or what's important about it in a way that we can understand? So the reason this building isn't a landmark is because it could kind of do that, but it didn't do it really well. And one of the main reasons it didn't really do it super well from the front is because somebody installed I-beams underneath the porch that extended all the way to the property line and left the porch roof supported, but there's no porch on the sides anymore, which the Sanborn maps clearly indicate there used to be. So that is a big compromise. The Sanborn map also shows us that there was a first floor porch originally. The 1909 map shows a porch that goes straight across the facade and ends at the sides of the building. At the back. By 1918, it shows it as an enclosed area. We don't know exactly when that happened or why or what kind of space it became, but there was still something sticking out on the ground floor. In 1944, there's a permit that was in our packets that indicated that there was some kind of a sun porch built. But we don't know what it was. Maybe it was just an alteration to that, because the 1950 Sanborn map still shows the same enclosed area, and it's still only one story. And I checked other historic buildings that I knew had always had a porch overhang with a balcony on top, just to see how the Sanborn map expressed those. And when there was a porch, a balcony on top of a porch, and the balcony was open to the sky, it was considered 2 stories. So we know that there was still no balcony in 1950. And then there was one more permit from 1965 that was going to remove the sun porch and replace it with 2 toilet rooms. So basically it became some bathrooms, and retain the roof deck. So somewhere between 1950 and 1965, that thing that stuck out had morphed into a balcony. So my understanding is that when the current owners acquired the property, that there was still some sort of shed structure on the back there, and that the balcony, I don't know if it was rebuilt or if it was built, totally unclear, totally unknown. So when I look at this building with very fragile integrity, the front porch has been compromised, presumably to allow cars to pass through to the back. Maybe that was the 1950s era. We don't know. Nothing on record tells us. But in the back, there has always been something sticking out, which is consistent with the dimensions of the building. So to me, that is the most important thing to retain. A flat back building with a big asphalt parking lot is not going to retain the continuity of the feeling and association of this building to me. So I really was not pleased to see a casement window and to be told that that was an expression of articulation of the facade. That was not appropriate. So I feel that any kind of articulation on the back that is genuine, an actual thing, it could be a skirt roof, it could be a balcony, it could be a trellis, because we have no idea what this balcony actually looked like. We could conjecture that, back porch originally, we could conjecture that it had the same kind of roof as the front porch and it just stuck out the back, but we really have no clue. There's no words that annotate this beyond its dimensions, the solidity of its walls, and the kind of roof it had. So, originally wood shingles, later composition, if you're wondering. So basically what I'm getting at is a change to this building that is not going to just be a lateral replacement of what's there, which is certainly fine if that's a choice that an owner wants to make, but a change should, in theory, move it closer to its ability to convey its significance and not further from it. So that's why I would not be comfortable in approving this proposal, and that I would really need to see some kind of articulation, which doesn't mean a bump, but an actual reference to that former porch that became a bathroom, that became a sunroom, that became a balcony.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Fonda Bernardi.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with the idea, and that the house does need something in that space in the back to allude to that quite legendary history of all those things that were happening back there. And I don't believe in any way that what's going to happen there on the back, particularly if it's on the second floor, has any impact on the parking. There will be no loss of parking, and there will be no gain of parking, given what's available in that lot back there. So I'm kind of actually looking at it from a slightly different point of view. Michael is a tenant, and these owners sell their units, and over time we'll have a whole different cast of characters. And our job is to take a long view. There's been an unfortunate history of tenant-owner battling here, and in some ways the building has suffered from this battle. But if we take the long view and say, well, what's the best thing that could happen to this house? What would make it the better house for the next tenant and more rentable for these owners? It would have something more on the back of it. It wouldn't be just windows. And that's where I'm interested in getting to, is what is that more? And that more should be articulated. It could be a popped out window seat. It could be a balcony. We left it purposefully vague so that there would be some place for the owners to, and possibly the tenant, to come together. And if that's not possible, then I think we need to take the bull by the horns. And our choice is whether the horns are held by the ARB or held by us. That's the way I'm looking at it. Either we send it back to ARB, with some direction, or we keep it here and we say, please continue and come back. So that's what I'd like to maybe discuss before we move to a motion. Where's the best place to get that articulation and at the least cost? I'm not interested in having them pay more fees and all that. I'm trying to compress this, get to a good product, get to something where we really did a good job on it. So I'm open to suggestions of how to get there.
Commissioner Kennedy.
I'm very much in agreement with what we've heard from our fellow commissioners, and I just wanted to say that in reviewing the revised design, I was surprised to see how similar in a way and functional it was to what I'll just call Exhibit 1, or also known as the unresolved state. It's in our report, and it shows how the plywood has boarded up the doors, and so there really isn't any use or open, there really isn't any way to get air into the space through that plywood at the moment. But the revised design just looks to me so much visually like that actual unresolved state that I didn't. To me, it's unattractive and didn't really at least attempt to address the issues that I brought up when we spoke about this at the last hearing.
Commissioner Newbold.
I think this is moving in the direction, but I have to agree with Commissioner Fondo Bernardi. I think I have two things. I think in some ways, the trick of the open windows gives you that perception of three-dimensionality, but during the year when it's closed, you still have that sort of flat facade. And I also feel as though, even though I appreciate the attempt at permeability, there's something about those fixed panels, even though I understand they're sort of the bottom of a door, I still want more somehow. But I think at the end of the day, when I'm looking at it sort of as the ARB, it's not quite there. It needs some dimensionality.
For me, I think that there are a number of points that are being made and reasons that I'm hearing that I don't tie into the job that's before us. I don't tie it into the ARB's purview. It all ends up in a place that could be ARB's purview, in that there's, in order to make the findings, there needs to be something more going on. Now, to achieve that end, I see two basic options that make sense, and one is to see if the applicant and appellant are open to coming back with another draft, and the other option is to remand it to the ARB and communicating the message that we think is appropriate. So if others are in agreement that those are the two basic approaches for us to choose from, then I would ask the applicant and the appellant to come forward with their thoughts, and if anyone wants to articulate what they would want to see from a revision more than you already have, then perhaps now is a good time to do that. Any objection to pursuing that approach? Okay. So if the applicant and the appellant could approach. So based on what you've heard, there's an interest in some additional elements to the design. Are you open to playing with some ideas and coming back to us with, a further refinement of what you've proposed?
I'd like to ask the city attorney to weigh in here.
What your options are?
On what the Planning Commission's options are.
So to speak to the chair's proposed options, the first option, as we discussed earlier this evening, because the code does require that the Planning Commission take action on the appeal within 30 days of opening the discussion, that's why it would require both your consent and the consent of the appellant, as well as the Commission's consent to continue. With respect to remanding it back down, the remand would need to be based on a reason to remand. As Mr. Traeger mentioned earlier, one reason to remand could be that there is a revised design that the ARB has not yet reviewed. So that would be a reason to remand. The Planning Commission could not just remand it back down without, having a reason to remand it back down. But those are kind of the basis of the two options that he's proposing. Does that help?
Yes, thanks. I guess we've been operating under the assumption that we cannot be compelled to build something in addition to what we're proposing. So I understand that the Planning Commission often weighs in on large developments, and they're looking out for all kinds of important considerations. This is a back of a house. I don't think we can solve all of the neighborhood's problems with whatever solution we eventually come up with, but I'm a little concerned that we're kind of leaking over the boundaries. So.
Right, that's why we've reason to remand it would be because there is a new design before the Planning Commission tonight that the ARB has not seen. Now, you could, could be, if you so wish to have a final decision tonight, you could withdraw this revised proposal and request that the Planning Commission make a determination on the prior submission, which was the conditional approval of the ARB. That's another option.
Which, well, the illustration on the left is one idea. That wasn't necessarily what the ARB's condition was. Am I right, Grace? The ARB's conditional approval of ARB, it just said that that the door holes would be used for new windows. It didn't say what size those windows would be. If that's something that's up to the discretion of the planning staff, or if that's something that should be considered. That was my understanding, was that there was some negotiation that staff and the homeowners would do.
That's true. The ARB condition, I believe, stated that they asked you to reuse the rough opening of the door and infill that with windows. And yes, it could be a different type of window, but that's one option that would comply with the condition. And just to clarify an earlier point, while it's true that staff believes the Planning Commission can't compel you to provide a balcony, they can certainly say that your proposal is not working, and I think that's what I'm starting to hear from at least a few of them.
Okay, so what would you like me to say?
Well, we're putting forth to you some options that we see, and one of them is that would you agree to a continuance where you would be coming back with revisions to your proposal for our consideration?
I'm not entirely sure that we want to do that. It seems, though, that this was a problem came up, and the ARB made a determination, and then Mr. Feinstein objected to that and appealed that decision. Perhaps this is kind of out of your wheelhouse. Maybe it should go back to the ARB with the revised design.
We withdraw or
Sorry?
I was going to say, maybe we just withdraw or revise it. As they suggested, we could just withdraw
Or
it.
we should withdraw that,
New one.
the proposed design,
They'd like to stick with going back to ARB.
and go back to the ARB.
Chair, if I
Conditional
may,
approval.
Yes, Mr. Traeger.
you may wish to ask the property owners if they'd like some time to think about it, and you may want to call the recess. I don't want to put them on the spot.
We are loath.
On the
We are
dais.
loath to extend this. This is so long, and we do have lives we need to get on with.
Well, I think what Mr. Traeger was suggesting is that if the commission was open to taking a 10-minute break, you could think through some of your options, and you could come back to us, with your thoughts, having a little bit of time to consider it. And I don't know if the commission is open to that, but is that something that you would?
Yeah. No.
I don't think we need much.
I don't think we need a lot of time. Would you like to?
No, all I was going to suggest, I think we understand that you don't like the revised design. I think the suggestion that we withdraw it is maybe the best one. We're very interested in resolution of this thing, and if what that means is that we're back to the Planning Commission making its decision within the 30 days about either supporting or denying the appeal, that may be the best way to go. But I did want to add one more thing to the record. Our interest and priorities on this building are on the front of the house. And if we're going to, and I'm not talking about the money it would cost to build a balcony or anything, but what we're interested in long term is really the long term viability of that house, which means probably reopening that front porch and really trying to restore that house to look the way it ought to as a 4-square house. And I would suggest you spend time looking at 128 Hollister more, because the rear of 128 Hollister is also a model of the sides of it. I think all the things you've said about the side issues about the ground floor porch are well taken, but there's nothing we can do about that now. So our best bet to improve this house, and what the owners are interested in, is spending money on the front porch and the front facade of the house that we think really matter. So, I mean, that's in the background. It's not what we've been talking about here, obviously, but I want you to know, relatively speaking, that's what our interest is.
They could have.
Okay, so I heard you mentioned the idea of withdrawing the proposal that's before us tonight.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is also out there for you to take some time thinking about it, 10 minutes. Before you give us your answer on that, I do want to ask staff, this is in this scenario where they would be withdrawing their proposal with the hopes that it would yield a decision tonight. That seems to suggest that this commission couldn't say that with what the ARB approved, this commission has particular objectives that they want to achieve, but feel that it would be better achieved through the ARB consideration of those goals. So that wouldn't be relying upon, I mean, would that be a viable basis for remanding the item when there isn't a withdrawal of the new proposal? Well, there is a withdrawal of the new proposal.
So I believe if the applicant is asking you to take action tonight and withdrawing the revised proposal, I believe you'd need to rule on the ARB decision. On that decision, I believe you can impose conditions in the same way that the ARB imposed the condition that whatever window configuration they end up doing in that rough opening of the door would be subject to staff review and approval. The image on the left is one option of many that probably comply with that condition.
So just for clarification, you're saying that whether we remand or not, in the scenario where they withdraw their proposal, it's no longer up to us, even if we feel that we have concerns that would be better addressed at ARB, and that we could remand with asking for consideration of those concerns?
Yeah. So my understanding is if if the revised proposal were to remain on the table, yes, you could remand it back to the ARB because that represents new information.
I understand.
If the applicant were to withdraw the revised proposal, because of the timelines at play here, they could ask you to take action tonight, in which case I don't believe that you could remand it back to the ARB. Now, in a similar fashion, you could deny, let me check my cheat sheet here.
All right. Uphold.
Yeah, you could uphold the denial and then articulate findings, and in a sense you'd be sending it back to the ARB.
With
if that's
fees.
Where you want it to land, there's a way to do that.
With the applicant paying fees.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So the question before you. You want 10 minutes?
I don't think we do. I think we know we would have a decision tonight.
Okay. So
And
so you are withdrawing the proposal on the right.
It sounds like that's the thing to do.
Okay. So, Commissioner Kennedy?
Just a clarification. That option wasn't explained to us in our staff report, so I'm not completely clear how that's an option.
Since this is a de novo review, and since that was the original decision that was being appealed, you have several options, and this would be one of them. I mean,
Well, that's not our decision, that's their decision. You're saying that option was always open to them coming into this meeting?
They back with not doing anything. They might have come back and said, we heard what you said, but we're going to stick with what the ARB approved. That was a possibility at their risk.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Newbold?
Okay, so I feel really stupid here, but I need you to walk me through then, you or you. So now we're looking at what the ARB approved. We're making a decision tonight. And if we uphold the appeal, what happens?
If you uphold the appeal and not approve the revised drawings because they've been withdrawn, you would be sending it back to the ARB. There's still a pending code compliance issue, so they need to address that in some manner. They would need to file a new application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? And of course, denying the appeal would yield the ARB's conditioned approval. Yeah.
For clarification, if we were still, I know it sounds like we're walking it back, but if we were still considering the applicant's revised design, the code compliance issue isn't still present? Because the way you just made it to sound is that if now, based on the owner's decision, we're now back to considering what we considered 30 days ago, the code compliance issue is still outstanding.
Yeah, the code compliance issue is still outstanding, and of course it's neither within your purview nor before you this evening, but currently there's a temporary stopgap measure. There's plywood installed. It was installed to make it safe, but that's not a long-term solution. And so to remedy that, the solution is to go to the ARB and Planning Commission on Appeal to get a long-term solution approved, so they can ultimately address that outstanding code compliance issue.
Well, that being the case, if the other one is withdrawn, we're really looking at, is the first one worthy of all the effort, pain, and agony that's been put into it? And I would move that it is not. It doesn't meet our articulation requirements as so carefully delineated by Commissioner Fresco. So I would say that we support the denial of this, basically, and it gets remanded automatically back to the ARB. I mean, I think that's the only place it can go at that point, unless we decide to keep it here. But we can't do that. because we tried that once. We said, can you give us articulation? They said, we can't. Okay, we don't want to and we can't. Even though there are many ways to, some cost effective, some more less, but there are many ways to articulate. We're not going to articulate, so then we got to go back to square one unless we like it. And I don't hear that here. I mean, I could be wrong, but we haven't taken a straw vote here. Is that good enough, the one on the left? That's what we'd be really saying, because the one on the right is gone.
So did I hear you making a motion?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
Can you clarify what that motion
Okay,
is?
the motion is to basically uphold the appeal and revert this back to ARB. And with the requirement that we would like them to consider articulation, more articulation.
So, I mean, we don't have the opportunity in front of us to remand or revert back to ARB. We can just
deny,
uphold or deny.
Yeah, we uphold the appeal then.
And in either, I mean, in the scenario where we're upholding, they're starting from scratch. And so there's no message to carry along.
We tried. We tried to give up a message and didn't work.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion before us. Discussion. Any comments from commissioners? Commissioner Newbold.
I'm going to support the motion, but it's very frustrating because it feels like we're going to get back on the cycle, and I'm sure it's frustrating for the owners, and I'm sure it's frustrating for the tenant, and I don't see a better solution, but it's just it feels like we're in a catch-22 or rats on a cage, and it's going to be taking staff time and money, and it's just very frustrating, but I don't have a better solution.
Commissioner Kennedy.
I'm going to ask the obvious. What the ARB chooses to do can be appealed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, well, your word was frustrating. I find it very disappointing because I felt like the revision went a long way toward addressing some of my concerns and some of the obstacles that I saw to making the findings. And those obstacles are definitely there with what the ARB approved. So, you know, put in this position, you know, I feel like the only option is to go ahead and vote for the motion, despite the fact that there was before us something that was headed in the right direction, and that, at least from my standpoint, little minor modifications, you know, didn't have to include a balcony, could have gotten us where we needed to be. So I'm frustrated and disappointed that we're in this position. Okay. Any other, Mr. Traeger, were you wishing to speak?
Yeah, so before you call the question, this body will have to articulate findings to uphold the appeal.
So would the maker of the motion like to articulate those findings?
Well, the findings are that it's not compatible with similar structures in the neighborhood in that it once had, and therefore it's been in some ways reduced in its structure of merit integrity.
Because this is an ARB appeal, you'll need to make the ARB findings, which we can help you with. Is there any way to put those on screen, guys?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so contributes. I don't think it meets A. Does it meet C? Most buildings in the area have balconies.
Well, they don't necessarily all
Right.
have balconies.
But they may have bay windows. There are other articulations.
Well, may I?
Please.
Yes, I think finding A,
otherwise.
I feel that the proposal doesn't meet finding A because a completely flat facade facing and completely unarticulated parking lot is not expressive of good taste or good design. And D, in particular, the proposed development is not in conformity with effective guidelines and standards adopted pursuant to this chapter and all other applicable ordinances, such as the landmarks ordinance and the historic preservation element that tells us that whenever we make decisions in the city that affect a historic resource, that we're supposed to take that into consideration.
So you are, yeah, okay, so that's a part of the motion, those findings. Any additional discussion on the motion? Okay, if staff could please call the roll.
Can I just interject for one moment? And
yes.
I'm sorry to be difficult. I didn't, could you perhaps paraphrase again? You need to make all 4 findings.
Okay.
And then to say that it doesn't meet the guidelines, perhaps you could expand, in that or
okay.
why they
It doesn't meet those
comply.
guidelines in that the historic preservation element and the loose both direct us to consider historic resources in all planning decisions that affect them. So that includes ARB and planning commission and staff decisions as well.
Right. So yeah, the question is, how many of these do we need to speak to right now?
Yeah, and that's fine. I think I misspoke earlier. To approve it, you need to make all 4 findings, but if you can't make all 4 findings, it's denied. So just making 1 finding is sufficient. Okay. It would be helpful, though, just for the entirety of the record, though, to get all your discussion in the form of the findings.
Right. So are there any commissioners that want to suggest language related to the findings on why they cannot make the findings here? Okay. Yeah, I was just asking.
Yeah,
if there are any
I think
others
unless
that want to.
people want to add more, I think A and D are the ones where it fails, and for the reasons Nina said. And I mean, unfortunately, we can't talk and work our way around those. Those are pretty clear.
Okay, so if there's no additional discussion, if staff could please call the roll.
Planning Commissioner Fonda Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco?
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes.
Commissioner Newbold?
Yes.
And Chair Perry?
Yes. Okay, so with that action, the appeal is upheld, and additional steps related to changing the facade would require a new application to the Architectural Review Board. Okay. So we've already addressed item 10A, item 11, written communications. Anything on 11A or 11B? Any questions from commissioners? Yes, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention under this item, Commissioner Fondo Bernardi had asked about one of the project lists and pointed out that there were some projects on there that should be removed. So I just wanted to let the commission know we are working on updating that list, and we'll get it to you as soon as we can do that. It's just it hasn't been gone through in a bit of time, so we're doing that now.
Thank you. Okay, item 12, future commission agenda items. Yes, Commissioner Kennedy.
I don't remember when it was. It might have been a year ago or 2 years ago, but at some point we had somebody come and talk to us about code compliance, and it might have been when there was somebody new that was hired, and I remember the discussion. I just don't really remember the time frame, but some of the testimony that we heard tonight about code compliance, I would like to maybe add, and I know we've got a full plate, so it might not be right away, but kind of fit on our agenda at some point, another discussion about this, kind of see what's happening in the city, to talk about maybe even this issue as a case study to see if there's anything that can be improved or how things are working, and to inform us more about these types of issues.
Yeah, we could. There's a new code compliance manager, so it's probably good timing to have her come and meet the commission and give you a bit of an introduction. I don't think we'd want to use a particular case as a discussion because it's kind of like a hearing on that item again.
Yeah,
So we probably won't do that, but we'll certainly arrange to have the new code compliance manager come to the commission.
Yeah, that'd be great, and so we can kind of like get an update and be able to ask questions if we have any, and just meet the new manager officer too. That'd be great.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks.
And given the night's discussion, I'd like to ask if there is an expected timeline with the revision of the architectural review guidelines.
So the discussion earlier tonight was regarding the landmarks ordinance. Is that what you're referring to?
No, just referring to that ARB appeal that we just had. And I mean, every time that we have an ARB appeal, and I'm taking a look at the design guidelines, which look like they were crafted quite some time ago.
Right.
There are no immediate plans to update that, although we concur that it needs updating. But before that, we're working on the design review guidelines for the zoning ordinance as well as the landmarks ordinance. We can always reprioritize based on the director's discretion, but that's currently the
right. And the landmarks ordinance that is in the second year of our 2-year work program, so that is on our list as something that we are going to get to.
So the expectation is that the landmarks ordinance is going to be getting attention next year, and there is no expectation on when the design guidelines will be revised.
We are not. Yeah, it's not currently on our work plan. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or future agenda items? Okay. Item 13, public input. I do not have any requests to speak, so that takes us to item 14 and adjournment. Thank you.